In Rhapsody, a musical adventure, you play as Cornet, a girl who has the ability to talk to and befriend puppets. In a bizarre twist, Cornet must become a hero and rescue her Prince Charming from a witch and her henchmen through the power of love. Rhapsody, a musical adventure, is a simplified SRPG. The battles are small-scale tactical RPG battles on a grid. This may seem intimidating if you've never been able to get into the genre, but it's absolutely not. Rhapsody may very well be a really good starting point for you to get into SRPGs because of how forgiving it is. Battles are also a lot faster to complete, only taking a few turns versus other games which they can take up to 20 to 30 minutes to complete. Unlike most SRPGs, outside of battles, it's a fairly typical JRPG. You run around towns, talk to people, explore, and collect treasures. It's all very simplified, not to the point where it feels bare bones, but more so that it's designed to be easy to get into. Things like equipping your characters are basically optional. Using your character's special abilities, magic, or items are basically optional. Honestly, even being forced to heal is rare since your characters level up after seemingly every battle, which heals them to full. If by some miracle a character is killed, the only way to revive them is to return to Cornet's house and pay her grandfather to fix them. Cornet is the crux of your party, and if she's ever defeated, you lose. Active participation in battles isn't really needed. The circle button will automatically make your characters move and act. This is more than enough to get through the majority of the encounters in the game. The AI for auto turn resolve is absolutely terrible, so it really showcases just how easy Rhapsody, a musical adventure, is when this terrible AI will absolutely demolish everything. Obviously, if you want to be more efficient, you can play Rhapsody as intended and use your abilities and spells for some of the more difficult encounters. Even doing some things slightly out of order and fighting some harder enemies at a lower level, you'll have no issues completing Rhapsody, a musical adventure. Presentation is really the selling point of Rhapsody, a musical adventure, obviously the music being the key factor. The idea of a game that's a musical is a decent concept. The problem is that Rhapsody has to be a game and therefore has an inflated runtime compared to a movie or a play, which makes the time between each musical number really long. Then, most of the actual musical numbers during the main game are simply reprised versions of previous songs.
I remember the song, I've known it for so long, and it feels so good to hear. Sounds a little sad but sweet just the same. Lovely melody. I remember the song, I've known it for so long, and it feels so good to hear. Sounds a little sad but sweet.
This combined with the very stoic delivery of these musical numbers is just really disappointing. A musical should be fun and be animated with interesting visuals to go along with the song. Most of them are really simple stills or a handful of characters spinning and moving slightly up and down to simulate dancing.
Deep inside this jungle green, mysterious kingdom that's never been seen. Land of the frogs, almost sacred place. Amphibian paradise, wide open space. So please come to our kingdom, the sacred land of the amphibian.
A good musical will also have songs that are integrated into the story, songs that fit the current situation. Rhapsody, a musical adventure, doesn't really do that, at least not in a meaningful way. A key point in the first hours of the game is the main character, Cornet, entering a contest that just so happens to have a singing component. It's really just there to make sure that there's some singing. It's a musical adventure after all. The soundtrack isn't bad and definitely has some songs that do feel like they would be fun additions that would have fit in great with the game. The problem is that they just didn't integrate them at all, instead focusing on a few songs and the rest of the soundtrack are just absent from the game.
I know that you're out there and I'm waiting for you. Cornet is my name and I'm a puppeteer too. With my puppet friends there's nothing that we can't do. They are there to help me make my dreams come true. sucker from above. But it did!
I love you, my prince. You are my true love. Cornet, won't stop your silly dreaming, please?
That's not true. Can't you see? I'm just trying to make my dream come true.
Dressed like that?
The songs are available in English and Japanese, which is a nice little feature if you're a bit of a weeb. It's also very Japanese in terms of humor. You'll either like it or hate it. It's pretty prominent, so if you're not a fan of it, be aware of that going into it and consider looking for something else. The story itself is just full of cliches, even if it has turned the formula on its head and Cornet must rescue the prince instead of the other way around. It just really isn't anything special to go along with the musical adventure that you want. The sprite work is appealing, it's well done. There is an absurd amount of asset recycling in Rhapsody, a musical adventure. Every single cave complex is the same set of turns, T-junctions, and standard four-ways with a slight variance to the hue. The same goes for any tower you have to climb, except those are even more similar. It makes it very difficult to navigate areas because things are all virtually identical. It's absolutely shameless in its asset reuse. It gets old the second time you see the same cave complexes and you're really just at the tip of the iceberg at that point. The easiest thing to say about the difficulty in Rhapsody, a musical adventure, is that there isn't any. Every battle, except for one, but more realistically about 4, can be easily beaten by repeatedly pressing circle, which is your auto-resolve turn button. Dying in Rhapsody should be considered extremely rare if you ever experience it at all. That being said, Rhapsody, a musical adventure has some must-lose battles, which is something that's just genuinely not enjoyable. The one battle that cannot be beaten by mashing auto-resolve just requires you to count 5 turns on Cornet and kill a target on her 6th turn. Failing this just forces you to run back to town through the current maze and talk to someone again. The final battle is hard enough that you need to stop pressing auto-resolve and call your own targets and use some abilities to get through them. These battles are totally possible to force through via auto-resolve if you're at a high enough level. At lower level, the AI is not good enough at focusing firing down the critical targets, which makes it easier to just do it yourself. There are 3 difficulty settings, with easy, normal, and hard for those who want even an iota of thought required for most battles. Even on hard, Rhapsody should still be considered extremely easy. Rhapsody, a musical adventure's main story, is quite short. Doing a handful of side quests on normal difficulty with a few extra listens to various songs, Rhapsody, a musical adventure was completed in 7 hours and 39 minutes on the dot. There's a lot of backtracking in the first few hours of the game. You're simply jumping between the first 3 areas for an extended period of time before the game opens up. Once it does open up, you do have some influence on the order of events. You are still gated by certain locations, but you can do some things in whatever order you want, which is always refreshing. There are a good number of side quests which involve collecting the puppets that act as your party members and their individual quest lines. Since Rhapsody is so easy, it's really not necessary to do any of the side quests besides for your own enjoyment and fulfillment. 2 of the more robust side quests include killing some of the optional bosses with particular party setups, which were still easy and only required going a little ways off the beaten path. One of the problems with Rhapsody, a musical adventure, at least the original PlayStation release, is that all the puppets join at level 1. This means, in all honesty, it's totally viable to just use the first 3 puppets you get for the entire game. The other puppets you can unlock have some nice features. There's a handful of ranged attacking puppets, and some of the offensive casters you can get, they can complement your melee brawlers. Even though you level very quickly in Rhapsody, a musical adventure, it's not fun to have to shuffle party members to maintain levels. When you're recruiting new puppets at level 1 and your current party is in the high teens or mid 20s, it's just not really an enjoyable experience and not worthwhile to level them up since the game is so easy to beat. A good number of the individual puppets' questlines require you to simply level them into their 30s. That's not fun, or worth the time to do so. If you stick with the core 3 for the entire game, they'll be in their high 30s to low 40s by the time you reach Beauty Castle and will be capable of demolishing the final encounters. Depending on how you're shuffling your characters, you may end up in the high 20s to low 30s in the same time frame, which makes the final battle a lot more difficult, but still quite easy. You just won't be able to use auto-resolve on it. Rhapsody, a musical adventure, is a good concept that's just not executed well enough to justify playing it. It's far too easy. 99% of the battles can be beaten while mashing the circle button to auto-resolve your turns. The few times you do need to actually participate in the combat, it's more so to bypass poor targeting AI rather than the battles requiring tactics and strategy. The musical aspect of the adventure is just not done well enough to justify the tedious and boring dungeon crawls to your next objective. So you have this really awkward situation where the game is boring because it's mindlessly easy. Then the main draw is the story and musical aspect, but it's full of cliches and the musical numbers aren't fun or memorable. As such, Rhapsody, a musical adventure, really isn't for anyone. If you're looking for a musical, go watch The Producers or one of the Disney classics if you want something more lighthearted and in line with what Rhapsody, a musical adventure, is going for. If you're looking for a strategy RPG, there are literally dozens on the PlayStation alone for you to choose, and Rhapsody does nothing better than any of them. Rhapsody, a musical adventure, gets recommended playing's most disgraceful verdict of not recommended.